welcome back to another episode of Rewrites and Reboots, where we look at bad movies and ask the ultimate question, can this be fixed with rewrites, or is it so bad that only a full reboot can save the day? My name's Richard.
And I'm Robert.
And today we're going to discuss a movie that is the start of it all for us. This was a movie that we looked at first. We decided to hold off on it, mostly for research and just not want to start on this movie specifically, but this is the movie that started the entire idea of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, and the one that we're going to be looking at today, is the 2013 Man of Steel movie with Henry Cavill.
Yeah, the reason that we didn't want to start with this movie is that it is the beginning of the DCU, which is their version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the problem is that the whole DCU sucks, with the exception of maybe Wonder Woman and Aquaman. And so, what we were having our discussions about this movie and about other movies, we thought about, well, if we're going to do Man of Steel, eventually we're going to have to touch on Batman vs. Superman and the Justice League movie itself, and even other movies like Suicide Squad and more. And eventually we're going to have to deal with that. But we don't want to just go every week Man of Steel, Justice League, or whatever the movie's releases are. We want to basically handle this movie for now, and then come in a couple weeks or whatever down the line and handle the next of the DCU movies, and just kind of build our own DCU reboot universe, I guess, is the ideal, but not have it where every episode's going to be that from now on. So there'll be other episodes between this and the next ones we handle.
Yeah, because like I told you, I didn't want to start or get known as just a superhero podcast. I wanted this to be much bigger than that. I want us to be able to tackle multiple genres, from comedies to, horror to superhero movies, even westerns. We've even started talking about what are some, westerns that we might look at. And so, we definitely wanted to get to this, but we wanted to make sure to first, kind of spread out a little bit, try different types of movies. But yeah, but we're finally here. I'm excited. This is one we've probably debated on and had more discussions on than any other movie up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited. So I guess first off, let's look at what makes Man of Steel needing to be rebooted or rewritten.
Alright, so to start it off, the worst part of it is literally not really because of the movie itself, but because this movie was not really meant to be the jumping off point for this DC connected universe that it ended up being. And so it wasn't built for that. And it shows in this movie when you get into Batman v Superman. So that's one reason to do a rewrite or reboot of it, is that it needs to be redone so it does properly connect to the rest of the movie universe without feeling ham-fisted into its anal cavity. But
what a visual.
Yes. But it has a lot of potential for being a Superman movie, but I felt like they were too afraid to put Superman in a negative light, but they were also not wanting to make him a Boy Scout Superman that we normally get. And so we came off with a Superman that just was blah and had no emotion, no real whatever to him. And that really starts to unravel the entire film when your main character is just kind of... You almost cannot care for Superman in this movie, is the way that I felt the whole time, because you don't get to really know him, because the movie kind of plays off the idea that you know who Superman is already, but then doesn't give you that Superman.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was anything against Henry Cavill. I think he's a fantastic actor. I just think he was given really bad direction, and they the problem sometimes that I feel like a lot of directors and producers do is they want to be fresh and different every time. And you can be that way. You can do new and interesting things with characters. But there are certain things that to me are fundamental elements of that character that no matter how you play with it, still has to remain to identify as that character. And for like Superman, being a Boy Scout kind of character, being, sort of this, always trying to do the right thing no matter what, always, he's gonna, if it means, saving this person instead of this, he's gonna go save that person, whether or
Mm-hmm.
not it helps him. That is always his goal, right?
Yeah.
You know? And this movie tried to do too much. It kept trying to act like, like one of the biggest problems we have with this movie is this sort of, for Superman, he never wants to be treated as a god. He doesn't want people to think of him as a god. And yet this movie did a lot of like savior-esque sort of over the top moments where it's sort of trying to show him off as like a god among men.
Yeah, and then the worst part is that other characters around him kept kind of pushing him to it. Like when he's born, and like in the very beginning of the movie, when he's born and they're going to send him to Earth because Krypton's about to die. And his father goes, the yellow sun will make him like a god among men, and they will treat him as such. And then later on, I think it gets echoed again by his father, or no, it gets echoed by Zod, I believe, about him being, he could be a god among men or something like that. Like, it gets echoed a lot of times, and he never really pushes back against that ideal either. He kind of just, he tries to say, yeah, I'm your ally and whatnot, but he doesn't really push back against the god among men uh, trope that they're trying to push on him, really, that I can remember.
Not to mention, he sort of plays it up too, because there are moments in the movies where he shows how little power or control they have over him.
Oh yeah,
You
like
know,
when he was in there with Lois Lane, and he goes and he's like, "Yeah, you got half." He's looking like through the X-ray and through the two-way glass, and he's like, "Doctor Banner, I can read it on your your name tag, and I can also see you have a half-eaten Mentos pack in your pocket." And it's like, and then he stands up, breaks the handcuffs. It's like, dude, no, you're not. That's not a Superman thing to just kind of show off. He's not a showboaty person.
no, he's very much an all shucks, country boy kind of mentality instead of kid, the country boy in the big city mentality. He's always had that, even with Superman, even as, uh, Clark Kent. He's always that way in some capacity. Superman never shows off for the sake of showing off, right?
Yeah.
Even in the comic books, it's very rare that he goes out of his way to show his power, right?
Yeah, and when he does, like there's one comic where he goes fighting a guy, and he finally is happy that he gets to go full power against this guy because it ends up being the cardboard world of cardboard speech, but he says, he's finally glad that he's doesn't have to treat the world like cardboard. He can just go full power. That's a rare moment in Superman because you never see him do that often. And this movie just kind of plays it where he's constantly showing off, and it's not a good Superman.
No, and another big thing about this movie that I didn't like is the non-linear approach to the story. I didn't like how we had so many flashbacks. I thought this movie would have done better if we'd stuck to one continuous timeline from the time he comes to Earth to his moment. So we would have seen that all rise instead of having it where, we have, Krypton destroyed, he makes it to Earth, and then we shift over and it's been 20 years and he's on a, freaking oil rig somewhere. Like, there's too much back and forth to keep the audience understanding what's going on and what we're trying to learn.
I
I
don't
think this movie hurt from that.
I don't think that really hurts, but what I do think hurt was that they had Jor-El um appear and basically tell him Zod's a bad guy. That should, to me, kind of really messed the movie up, because I could have, especially, and I'll get into it more when we get into how I want to rewrite this, because I'm going rewrite. I don't know how you want to do yours.
I want to rewrite it, but it's going to be a heavy rewrite because of the fact that I still like certain actors. I like Lois Lane in this movie. I like
Amy
Henry
Adams
Kavanaugh.
is awesome.
Yeah,
Henry
I like
Kavanaugh.
I like those people. I liked Lawrence Fishburne in there as the editor of the Daily Planet. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
There are certain actors that are in this movie that you're like, you can't really replace. I mean, you could, but you wouldn't want to. If you were going to pick your crew anyway, you're probably picking these people anyways.
Yeah, I definitely would have, and that's why I'm doing a rewrite, because I think that the actors were great. It's just the script was crap, and there's no amount of good acting that can fix a crap script.
Also, this movie dragged on a lot longer than I remembered. It'd been several years since I've seen this movie. Probably since it dropped in DVD in like 2000.
It's
13,
weird.
14.
It's really weird because the movie dragged on forever, but it also felt like it was rushing. Like, it just wanted to get to the next epic battle, that next epic scene, the next reason to use CGI. It like kept trying to jump into that and keep jumping, and it was like, but the pacing fell off, but the movie dragged for doing it in a weird way.
I think it's because the movie dragged because we ended up with those sort of like disaster porn moments over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's like, how many times can you show me this before I, as an audience, sort of shut off my mind and just go, all right, they're destroying this area now. I mean, at least in some ways DC has learned better over time with that, and like, with like Wonder Woman, it was out in an airfield. We've kind of learned that mistake, but Man of Steel suffered from that sort of Transformer error of Michael Bay cinema, right, where it had to be big explosions, big destruction all the time. And it's like, I understand that Superman fighting someone who's basically of the same caliber as him is gonna be destructive. You expect that. But the last probably 40 minutes of this movie is 5 minutes of actual story and 40 minutes or 35 minutes of just straight up disaster porn. That's all it really is.
Well, part of that comes from the fact that they already gave away their hand super early. We knew Zod was a bad guy before he even showed up in the scene. Before Superman actually met him, he already knew who Zod was. So when Zod appears, it's like, yeah, this is bad guy. It doesn't give a chance for there to be any story, and then, it's literally just the build up to the final fight without having an actual real dialogue about who these characters are. And I think part of that comes from the fact that this movie heavily based that who these characters are because of their comic history or the previous movies' iterations, right? We're supposed to know who Zod is because of the Christopher Reed's Zod was an evil guy. So we know he's not evil. We know he's evil. We know who Superman is, so we don't really need to build a Superman. But the thing is, you're building a brand new movie franchise, because I believe this was at least going to make new Superman movies, if not the DCU. So you really should build these characters and build up who they are, and we didn't get that. We really just built the event, the final fight. That's what we were pushing towards. And it was constantly built up like that. And that's what I really hate it.
Yeah, and there's so much of sort of the Superman mythos and Zod's history, according to which version you're looking at, which comic book run, that to play with that could have been built, you know, smoothly and worked just perfectly fine. And this movie just, I feel like that you have to remember that every time you do a new version of a character, you have got to make the assumption that the person watching it knows nothing about this character,
Yeah.
right? If you come into it with they know who Superman is. Well, maybe that 10-year-old boy who's never, didn't grow up with a family that's big into superheroes, maybe this is his first superhero flick.
Yeah.
He may have never got to see Superman or had to watch any of his stuff or read a comic. You've got to think of it then that state of mind. So, yeah. So this movie had a lot of issues, a lot of problems, which is why, like I said, this is why it's on this show. And yeah, so we're gonna have to rewrite it. And where do we even start with this, really?
Well, so in my rewrite of this, I want to start, instead of starting with the whole Krypton story, which was like 20 minutes of his birth and, the destruction of Krypton itself, I want to completely. Well, let's not even talk about that. What I want to start off with is actually him coming to Earth. So, like, my first scene for the Superman movie would be, out in Kansas, out in Smallville. We start with Martha and Jonathan. I had to remember his name real quick. Jonathan and Martha, like in the truck driving. Maybe it's like nighttime or something like that, and they're just driving through like down a dirt road, fields of corn and stuff around them.
When do nighttime? I do evening, sun setting, right? Sort of that sort of starting to set kind of thing. Set the mood with some sort of country song, some nice little swinging thing. Maybe he's got like a Hawaiian girl up there, right? Just kind of going down a dirt road, right? Got to set the mood. I think that's important. If you're going to set the scene, let's set it in such a way that it kind of comes off as sort of hunky bunky, older couple in the car just kind of having a good time going down a dirt road, headed home.
Well, I wouldn't even have them at a good time, but I would have it where like they are listening some old 50s country, Hank back there. I'm just a poor boy in the country. Some weird thing like that.
I'm going to ask you never to do that again on this podcast.
I'm just a poor boy. Nobody loves me. Yes, that will be cut out.
Unfortunately, it probably won't.
It probably won't. But anyways, but yeah. So they're just sitting there driving. He's talking about, the struggles of the farm, how he's can't really do it much anymore. He's getting up there in the age. He needs to get help, or Martha says he needs to get help. Maybe hire what's that boy's name? And he's like, I don't need that youngster. He's got his head too far up, in them video games and stuff like that. Like, just talking crap about, some kid in the town. And as they're driving, that's when, the meteor spaceship comes flying through, almost misses the truck, causes him to spin it out real quick, and it goes through into a field and just crashes through. When after he, make sure they're both okay and everything, he goes out there to go look, and there's this spaceship, and inside is a baby. And this is where we start off, is them taking the child and the spaceship back to their place and eventually raising this baby. And we go into like him as a child in the school age and use the scene of like when his powers started kicking in and his, he was x-raying through the teacher and hearing the, everything loud and whatnot. Like right as we start that kind of right before it starts to hit, like him sitting in class. Start building up the kid.
Yeah, because I agree with you on that for the most part. I probably would limit Martha and Jonathan's conversation a little bit. I wouldn't have it go that long. I want it to, my personal opinion, I think that what you're trying to set up are a few things there for them having the financial struggles and all this. I don't know if that's a good start. In my personal opinion, I just leave it with them writing, but that's a nitpick and not really
I mean, it helps
overall.
establish. It's just a casual conversation thing, kind of establishing that they're getting up there in the years. They're not the young couple that would normally be raising a kid either, and they're also struggling. And then by the time we get Superman coming in, once he grows up a little bit, he's helping around the farm and whatnot.
Well, yeah, and going back to the school scene, I think that is probably one of the better scenes that was in the original Man of Steel.
Mm-hmm.
I just would have liked it if we took those scenes and took his raising and really focused. Even a good 30 minutes of this movie would have done good to have followed him throughout those formative years.
Yeah.
And really had the lessons from Jonathan and Martha established and kind of keep having it where they're exploring this sort of him discovering these powers and they're not really sure about it, and giving him answers and he's not sure and his struggles with bullying and all that. I love a lot of those early scenes like that. I just felt like they were being thrown back and forth and kept from being a cohesive thing, because if you do that, you establish the foundation in which his character's beliefs are, and it builds a better character once he's adult, so you understand the motives behind his actions.
Yeah, the only thing that I would change up in the movie, Jonathan kept kind of giving him this back and forth, you shouldn't show your powers, but one day you're going to have to be the hero, or you're going to have to make the choice to be the hero. Like, he kept giving this weird advice that just contradicted each other. I honestly would have had it where Jonathan is giving him the, don't tell people what you are, don't reveal who you are, they're not, people might not understand and be afraid of you. And I would have it where Martha is like, you are destined for greatness. You're destined to do something with your life beyond, you have these abilities, you should do something with them.
Yeah, her say stuff like, you're special and someday the world will see how special you are.
Yeah.
Just like I see you, or things like that, because we really established that, in like that school scene where he got his powers, how close a relationship they had, right?
Yeah.
If she's able to calm him down and understanding his struggles. So yeah, I think those are important, and I think that this movie would do a lot to, move it along like that. Now, I have a question from here.
Okay.
There's two ways that I think you could go with this. One, you go the way that the movie did, and have it where he just bounces around to odd jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think you're probably leaning towards. Or have it where we go the more Smallville route, where he goes to Metropolis to chase that journalism deal.
See, I actually like him doing the small jobs, because part of it, I like the idea of Lois tracking this mysterious hero guy, right? Pulling off these weird feats. So, like, the guy holding up the oil rig for the people to escape. I want her to cover those kind of weird stories, and I would like to have it where Lois isn't, this great, well, she's not considered the great, publisher or Polish, what's that award that the newspaper people get? Starts with a P.
Yeah, it's like Plutzer,
something like that.
Yeah, I can't. I know what you're talking about. My brain is just.
I would rather
over.
her be kind of an up and comer, like she's fighting the system of her being brand new and wanting to do these hard hitting stories, and then Perry, her editor or whatnot, being like, "Listen, chasing after ghosts and mystery men and men in tights, like this is not what sells. I want you to go after senators and their sex scandals. I want you to go after, celebrities. I want you to go after something that people will actually read. I want him to be that guy where she's basically trying to do something that he doesn't want her to do and kind of put a thing. But I also want her to start gathering the evidence and being right. So like the one scene where he's in the bar, right? And the trucker was like messing with the woman. Then later he puts the guy's truck or a bunch of poles to the guy's truck. Like I would have rather him actually stood up to that guy, threw him out or something like that, and they get into a fight and like he accidentally breaks the dude's arm in the fight. And it's she just kind of follows his trail for a minute and kind of builds up this because he does that, he kind of young reporter himself, because he's still close kind of to where the oil rig stuff is, big for her britches kind of thing.
Well, yeah, you got to push her. I would think you'd want to push her in the beginning as sort of an independent, and I use this word lightly, but feminist kind of character. Sort of independent
girl power
thing where she's determined she's gonna make it and everything, and she's gonna chase the stories that no one else is willing to chase because they think they're dumb or stupid or just outrageous, and she thinks that this is how she's gonna make her way in. It's not gonna be covering senators or all this kind of stuff because no one's gonna let her get that close to a story. But the stories that nobody's looking at and nobody cares about, she's gonna have her way in.
Yeah, and so I would have him do a couple of, heroic feats, and she shows, maybe we don't, the oil rig's the only one we show, but she shows, where a man walked into a burning fire in Portland and walked out with some kids or follows, this guy through the mountains where he lifted a boulder off of a hiker that was trapped underneath a rock fall. Just like weird events where you don't really have enough information to tag him, but you can follow his trail of helping people throughout the place. And so eventually when she doesn't really get him out into the open, but she does get the story out. Either through the blog system, like she ended up doing.
I like that part.
Because I like the idea that maybe she gets fired because she keeps doing it, right? And she eventually blogs it. And it's that blog, and when she releases those stories, that catches Zod's who is basically, the way I have it, Zod and his people are in space, right? And they're collecting information, trying to find some place to go, and they see this, the news cycle, whatnot, coming from Earth, and they translate it, and he realizes that's a Kryptonian there.
I'm gonna disagree with you there. I think that we don't need to explain, at least that far in, why Zod, anything about Zod. Really focus on him. I don't, and I also feel like that's a weird coincidence that Zod would be close enough to be following Earth history and stories.
It doesn't have to be just Earth history. He could be anywhere, and just the information has traveled to that point.
I still like the beacon thing. Now, I don't like how we get to his sort of ship in the Solitude. I don't care for that part of it.
I don't want that beacon, period.
Why? I think the distress signal is perfect.
The reason that I don't want the beacon is that I don't want first of all, I think it's a cop out. Just be like, oh hell, the spaceship up in the sky, and it just appears. I would rather, Zod picks up the, information he sees. He recognizes a Krypton through
a
Kryptonian through the news thing would be an interesting thing, because I don't want to look like he called them down. I don't want Superman calling down Zod. I want it where basically Clark doesn't know what he is, right? He is told he's an alien, but he doesn't know anything more than that, right? He does go out and try to help people, but he tries to do it in the way that Jonathan, would have wanted, which is not revealing who he is and keeping quiet about it. But it does get exposed. Once Zod comes down, though, Zod appears to Earth trying to say that he's a refugee. And this will eventually come down about the time Lois tracks down Clark. I would have it where she would eventually find him, uh, and he doesn't know anything. But then Zod comes and makes an announcement to the world, the kind of, not quite the way he did it, but, have his spaceship, like, hanging out over, over the ocean, and it gets spotted, and the world sees it, and he tries to explain to the world, I and my people are refugees. We come from a dead planet that has destroyed, and we know that one of ours has been living among you, and we would like to speak to him. Which Clark then goes to Zod to find out the answers.
I still disagree with you a little bit. I get where you're going. I still think that Zod finding out that way, I think is weaker, to be honest. I think that is a dumb cop out. And I think Clark, Superman looking for answers to his own origins. And
yeah, but
the
having the freaking Kryptonian spaceship on Earth buried under ice for thousands of years, and he finds this crap, which, by the way, what the hell are U.S. military doing in Canadian waters looking at what they think is a Nazi-era submarine? The Canadians would do that on their own. Thank you very much. There's
I'm
no
okay
point.
with throwing those parts out, but you're fighting semantics right there when I'm talking about, and I didn't say it needed to be in Canada either.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think the spaceship needs to be there, period.
The spaceship is there because of the fact that it's showing that
the spaceship
Krypton was colonists. They would send out exploration ships that look for other life. That is established from even in the
the spaceship also allows him to talk to his father, who gave up the secrets of Zod.
Well, we don't have
and
to
all
have that
stuff.
I don't need the ship to be his father telling him about Zod or anything. I would have it where he at least gets, finds something. It doesn't even need to be a ship. It can be a remnant, something that was left behind by the explorers.
It could be, if we're going to go with your beacon idea, which I think is stupid anyhow, but why can't his baby ship just send out the beacon? Maybe he activates it somehow.
Well, there you go.
Then have that if you want a beacon.
Why are you getting so mad about it?
Because I think that the whole beacon thing is stupid to me.
I feel like Zod's sitting out in outer space and just sitting there reading newspaper. Zod basically is dumber.
I don't think so. Because here's why I think Zod would end up at Earth anyhow, right? Is that Zod, what we would eventually find out, which you're not going to let me get, I was going to get to that part later, but let me get to this part now because I want to explain shit to you. Zod would eventually, we would eventually find out that Zod had been tracking wherever Kal-El had been going anyhow, right? But he got trapped where Kal-El was able to get out there. Zod's been floating out in space looking for him all this time, right? So he's 30 years behind, hopping place to place looking for this Kryptonian ship because he's trying to get the last of, or he's trying to get whatever information Jor-El has hidden, which we could use that weird baby skull thing, which
I would make it something different.
I would make it something different, yeah,
sure.
But I would definitely have it like maybe the secrets to rebuilding more people is inside that spaceship that and he needs to get,
or like an activation code for the terraforming machines.
Well,
right?
I wouldn't even get it off the terraform. I think his terraform should be there, but as far as like creating new Kryptons through the process they had before, I would say that's something that he stole, put on the ship, or put, in that little crystal thing, and that's what he's been after. And so he's been tracking, looking for him the whole time. But we weren't going to say that right here. that was something I was going to come down the road, but now you've made me have to put that out there. So back to what I'm saying, Zod has been looking for him anyhow. But what we see as the audience is that he sees, there's an alien ship out there floating around somewhere in the galaxy. Probably we can put him someplace out there by Neptune, right? He gets the messages. He starts to read, the stories, and it pops up, and he catches interest, which is why he comes to Earth. Now, I could change this much, right? Instead of him just appearing to Earth and just be like, Earth, we're refugees, I would actually have it where, Superman's trying to do some sort of heroic thing, and they show up and do the heroic thing for him, and be like, and he's like, who are you people, kind of thing, and they explain, my name is Zod, and we are Kryptonians, like you. Like, we could do something like that.
I wouldn't even have them meeting him like that. I would have it where he starts to do something heroic, and Zod and them show up. I'm okay with that. I wouldn't want them to recognize him immediately, right? I would like them to have it a little bit.
Well, considering they, like, in the movie, they knew what the Yellow Sun would do to their DNA, right? So they would, and he could explain, they've gone to other planets before, the colonies, they had records of what the Yellow Sun, so when they saw, him doing what he did, and the fact there's Yellow Sun there, they recognized that's a Kryptonian under the influence of a Yellow Sun. He could explain that, but that's how they figured him out. And then what I would have it is they track him, and what ends up getting revealed is they actually set up the disaster to save the people, to catch his attention, and to get there when he's there. And so they set up the meeting, basically.
Would you still have Superman at that point in normal clothing?
Yes.
Okay, so he's not doing the uniform, the suit, nothing.
He's not doing the uniform or nothing, but he does get brought in. He does get to talk to Zod, right? And Zod kind of tells him, we're Kryptonians, our planet was destroyed, and have some sort of thing where he's like, he's talking to him. He's like, how did you even get here? Eventually, they go to the farm, and that's when he sees, the symbol on the spaceship or something of Kal, and goes, oh, you're the son of Jor-El. You're Kal-El. I knew your father. And, like, that's when he kind of gives him the story about him and his father being friends, Zod and Jor-El being friends, and how the two of them had tried to stop the destruction of Krypton against the council and whatnot.
Minor change there. Wouldn't have them as friends. I'd go the Superman Earth 1 storyline, make them brothers.
Okay, make them brothers.
Because that's going to make Superman trust him more, because he's been longing to figure out more about his sort of space family, right? And wondering about that, and having someone like Zod come up and be, I was your father's brother, I'm your uncle, makes him have this sort of, longing to work with Zod because he's family. Okay. Right? I like that dynamic.
All right. So I would have it once he's talked to Zod and whatnot. Zod tells him, we are, because of the influence of the Yellow Sun, and you growing up in this, you have changed in ways we haven't. And, in time, yes, we will be like you, but not right now. Or generations from now, we'll be like you, but not right now. But he's like, you grew up here on this Earth. You have made friends. You have an Earth identity. He goes, why, and your name is already out there somewhat, thanks to the reporter lady. So act as our ambassador to Earth. Act as the Kryptonians, help us. And he explains to them that what the Kryptonians want to do, and eventually, and this will actually be explained probably in, like, when Superman actually becomes Superman. I'll have it where, like, Zod makes an outfit for him under the colors of the House of El, which are the red and blue with the symbol and everything. I would have it where Zod gives him that outfit and he goes, this is a symbol, or make it like a more fancier outfit than what Superman would wear, but have it like, this is our traditional dress, with the capes and stuff like that. And have it where he reveals, Superman reveals himself thanks to Lois Lane, right? And basically reveals himself as Kal-El, a and he explains his story. I was born on Krypton. I grew up here on Earth, and my people, the Kryptonians, have come here, and he explains their story, and that becomes a newsworthy thing. Eventually, the UN wants to talk to Superman and whatnot. And this is where I think we start to bring in our another character, which is Lex Luthor. So during the UN meeting, when they're talking to him and whatnot, I would have it where the U.S. government isn't exactly trusting of Superman, right? There's still a lot of questions and whatnot, and it's outside the UN meeting. One of the U.S. ambassadors there is talking to a U.S. general. They're talking about, if he has these powers, what can we do? Is there ways that we can fight this? And that's when Lex just pushes himself into the conversation just out of nowhere and is like, maybe I can help you with that. And they go, who are you? He goes, oh, I'm Lex Luthor of LexCorp. We make a lot of your weapons, military tech and whatnot. And he goes, yeah, you also make them for the Russians, and you make them for the Chinese, and you make them for a lot of people. You're a weapons manufacturer, a gun dealer. He goes,
yeah, a warmonger.
A warmonger. And he goes, ouch, that hurts, especially from someone who uses our technology. I see you're driving around in this armored car that we designed. But eventually, Lex puts in his thing.
I think you're messing up a little bit.
Why?
Because you're going more Jesse Eisenberg
with
your attitude right
I'm
there.
I'm not going quite that way because he wanted to, I do want kind of a smartass. And but I want him to be a very suave and sophisticated, but I don't want him to come off crazy.
No, but I feel like your tone right there was more akin to that. And like I've told you, of all the characters in the DCU, the person that had to go, and it's nothing against the actor, I just think he was the wrong person for Lex Luthor. Had he been Riddler in a Batman movie, I could see that working. He's a good character actor for other roles. But in this movie, I think you'd have to replace him with someone who's going to come off as having a presence, right? Automatic presence in the room, who has sort of that suaveness, but can also be, have a dangerous tone to things he says and be sort of a smart ass about it. And like I told you, my pick for a perfect Lex Luthor, kind of going off of the idea that, like the Justice League cartoon show had done, I want to do, what's his name? Blair Underwood.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in everything from, I think he was in some of the Medea stuff. He's been in pretty much everything out there. He's been around.
He's a bad guy in a lot of his
He's a bad
films.
guy, but he has a way of doing this thing where he comes off as sort of doing it, being bad for good reasoning kind of guy. Like he's sort of like, oh, I'm, it's for the greater good kind of thing when it really isn't. But he has a way of playing that and has an attitude where he comes off as a strong, powerful presence. And I think Lex Luthor has to come off that way where you as the audience, even if you, knew the name Lex Luthor, which means, but even if you don't, and this guy comes off, you wouldn't be quite sure if he's good or bad from the start, right? He needs to have it where he's such on a dangerous line. He's like Johnny Cash. He's walking this thin line of sort of, is he good? Is he bad? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of like bringing him in then. I still disagree a little bit of how Superman and Zod meet. I feel like that story still needs some work and some tweaks. But I don't really know where to go with that. But for now, I'll kind of digress on that.
Well, I like the ideal of Superman's getting his ideal of what Krypton was and who his family is, especially his actual, biological father through Zod, and then eventually, once Zod reveals as a bad guy, he has to question, is what he knows true? Is he, what does it mean to be a Kryptonian, and what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be, because, and also it's going to set, by him acting as ambassador for the Kryptonians, it's going to put him in a bad light once Zod and his people, flip and become the bad guys. Which will allow Lex Luthor to kind of do what J.J. Jamerson does to Spider-Man, which is like, you're a menace, you're a bad guy, and Lex through he'll be able to pull that off, be like, look, the Kryptonians are bad, Superman's got to be bad, because that's what Lex's deal is that later on he sells the ideal that aliens are bad,
Yeah,
Kryptonians are bad.
and could sell this idea of, how long before Superman gets tired of being good and switches. What,
How do we know
all
he's our protector?
What if he has a bad day? Who stops Superman if he has a bad day?
Yeah, and he sets himself up as the guy that will stop Superman. But anyways, eventually Lex makes a deal with the military to basically, he's got this new project, a mech, fighting unit thing. He thinks, power suits or something. They'll make a super soldier, and he believes it can take on somebody of Superman. He goes through and he talks about, this boulder this guy lifted up and it took this much amount of time. So obviously this is the limits of his strength. We see he can fly. Well, I have, jet boosters on these things. My robots are much stronger. I can make a man better than Superman is basically the proposal he gives to the military. And the military, the U.S. government or the U.S. military secretly start to work with him on this and have it ready. Eventually, what the Kryptonians ask is that because the yellow sun, the Earth's atmosphere, isn't 100% good for them, but they come up with the plan to terraform this island way out in Pacific, way far away from everyone, and explain, we can create a world that will inhabit, or an area we can inhabit until our generations are able to, exist like, Kal-El does in the rest of the world. We just ask that we get this one island that has no inhabitants, no endangered creatures, out in here nowhere. Let us use our technology to form it for us, and that will be our refuge for a while until the, time comes that we can. And it actually gets agreed upon. That's where the terraforming thing comes in.
Yes, I would have one thing to add there. I would say that the only reason the world governments allow them to sort of be given this islands of land is, I think they would have to have the trade-off is, we give you this, you show us that technology.
Yeah,
because I want the world to start being affected by alien technology, especially as we go farther into the the sort of rebooting and rewriting of the universe as we go.
Kind of like Marvel has been affected by the alien technology.
Yes, I really want to start adding those elements so that down the line those have more importance. Small details like that are super important.
Yeah,
down the road.
And I could see Zod saying he'll agree to those kind of things, because that he doesn't plan on the Earth remaining this way. But he's like, we'll start with we'll take this a group of islands over here, we'll turn them into the new Krypton, and we will share our technology with the world, with the UN. And they agree to it because, countries are going to want that kind of technology, the space travel, the terraforming, what else that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so Superman basically becomes the ambassador to all of this, but I would have it where eventually Lois, through some random event she just happens to stumble upon, hears about the actual plan for terraforming.
I think I'd have it this way, and I think you're touching on something. I would have it where Lois, being a journalist, always questions things.
Mm-hmm.
And while everybody else, minus Lex Luthor and others, most people in the world sort of, once they're past their original trepidation and fear over, the arrival of aliens, sort of embrace them because of the technology that's available, and sort of turn a blind eye to what Zod is really.
Yeah.
And her as a reporter, she goes, "See, this doesn't feel right. Something about this is off. If they had this technology to do this, why did they come? What's their purpose for being here? How did they know about him? And just these little things that start not adding up in her head.
And then have it where
She like sneaks on their ships, or she
I
gets on the
I would
island.
have it where she requests to have an interview with Zod, and Zod allows it because she's the one that broke the story of Superman and has been acting as the media for the Kryptonians anyhow
Mm-hmm.
through Superman. So I would have it where she wants to have an interview with Zod, and so they bring her to the island after they have started terraforming it, and you see the Kryptonian crystals growing up, and they're green crystals, and they're building, their weird structures of Kryptonian built, and she's talking to them and everything, and taking pictures and whatnot, and eventually there's a conversation. I would have it where she's learned Kryptonian too, through. I would have it where she's starting to, at least she can catch a couple words, and she through that learning of Kryptonian, because Superman's learning it too, because he didn't learn Kryptonian. So they're teaching him, he's teaching her. We could use that as a kind of their relationship building in some scenes between, where he shows her a couple of Kryptonian words that he's learned. But she begins to learn the Kryptonian language. While he's there, Zod says something to somebody in Kryptonian, thinking she doesn't understand this language, right? And then, but she catches just enough to realize what they're actually doing, or enough that she's got like something ain't right really flashing, gives her that red warnings. And
Yeah, and I could say that the reason, like, even though Superman is learning Krypton and she's learning it too, is habit where Superman is sort of like a kid in a candy store,
Yeah.
right? He becomes blind to Zod and what's going around him, because him finding out where he's from and learning his people's language and seeing their technology is like everything he's obsessed with right now. He's not really worried about how the world feels or everything. He's found his people.
Yeah.
He's found his uncle. He has family now.
Yeah.
Right? And so this makes him very blind to it, and have it where, it's her, overhearing something where, someone makes a complaint about this is taking too much time, or, we're ready for stage 2 or something like that.
Mhm.
Right? Or something like that.
To expand the terraform beyond the island.
Yes.
And I would and she catches that through knowing Kryptonian, through learning it from Superman, who she's starting to develop a relationship with, because she's kind of the reporter for the Kryptonians at this point. Like, other reporters aren't getting the exclusives that she's getting, which is having her rise in the newspapers anyhow, much to Perry's dislike that she was right all along. But she eventually gets some red flags. She tries to say something to Superman, but Superman's like, "It's you probably heard it wrong, it's probably nothing." But their conversation is overheard by somebody. Then I would have it where eventually Zod figures out that she's snooping, knows more than she's letting on, and he ends up imprisoning her to keep her quiet. And so while she's trapped in some sort of prison, Zod and Superman are having this conversation about the everything, and Zod lets it slip, that like through just accident lets it slip, we're this is just the beginning. We're planning on bigger and greater things. And he goes, "What do you mean by that?" And he's like, "Oh, just we're planning on rebuilding Krypton." And he talks about the codex that has like the genetic map of all of Kryptonians, and he's like, "You're going to make new Kryptonians? Are they going to start living among the population?" And, he says something like, eventually the Kryptonians will outnumber the people, the humans, if or will humans will become irrelevant to the Kryptonian might one day. And he's like, kind of taken back, like, what do you mean? And he goes, it's just survival of the fittest, I believe, is how Earth calls it. The superior species eventually overtakes the lesser one, and which causes kind of bit of a thing. But Superman lets it go for a minute, walks off, and then he finds Lois by just as he's walking. He hears her hollering, and his super hearing catches it, and so he gets down there where she is and breaks her out, and she explains what she thinks she knows. And when he starts to go confront him about it. Well, I would have it where scientists kind of monitor the situation for the military have kind of figured this out themselves, that these crystals, which are supposed to be this little area here, but they can look under through sonar and stuff. These crystals are going way beyond that under the ocean, and if untouched, they will eventually spread and eventually start to terraform the Pacific, which will cause dramatic climate change and whatnot. And it's at this point they decide to really bring in Lex Luthor's, and Lex Luthor's like, I told you this was going to happen, that they were going to betray you. Once, and he's like, how quick can you have your super soldiers ready? We need to see what's going on that island. And Lex is like, we have a whole factory, and like maybe it's like through where they're like talking to him through like a camera, like not, I don't want to say a Zoom meeting, but something like that. And then as he says, we have a whole lot ready. We can be deployed as soon as you want to. And then the lights flicker on behind him, and you see where he's just got loads of these super soldier suits basically just built up behind them. And he goes, I've made a couple of modifications so they don't have to be manned. Now they're full on, they can be controlled remotely, so we don't have to worry about the loss of human life either. And eventually, the military starts to demand answers. The UN starts to demand answers, and Superman is brought before the UN again to explain why these crystals are going so far, why all this stuff. And he tries to explain, with Lois's help, that, Zod is, no, I don't think so. I think I would cut that. I would have it where he does go up there to try to confront Zod, gets his ass whooped by Zod, and Lois is able to escape the area, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Superman gets his ass whooped, and that's when they use kryptonite on him for the first time, and he learns that he does have a weakness, and that's when Zod's like, we knew what the yellow sun would do to our people, but we also knew what one of the most readily available minerals of our people, the power of all of our technology, this kryptonite, would do to you too. Our strength, your weakness. And, uses that. So Lois does get away, thanks to Superman's help beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes and tries to tell Congress, who's already, and the U.S. general's like, yeah, we've already figured this out. This is the information we have. So the world basically wants to declare war on the Kryptonites now. With Kryptonians. Yeah, they want to declare war on the Kryptonians. And that's when they deploy Lex Luthor's mech units out, because the military's like, we've been working with...
We have a contingency plan.
We have contingency plans. This is one of them. So they revealed they got all these mech units coming out, and they drop them out of, like, fucking bombers. Like, tons of bombers are flying over. They're falling out like bombs, and then, boom, jets in the back and come in to fight. And because of that, it allows Superman.
I have a way of doing that scene, because I'm a scene guy.
Yeah,
I vision scenes. I would have them, instead of dropping them like bombs, I would have it almost like a play on like Normandy invasion. Have it where the Navy shows up with ship after ship, and then they just start, these robots get unloaded, and they're just walking out of the sea. Hundreds upon hundreds of these mecha robots, and they're coming out of the sea just as, marching onto the island.
Well, the thing is, because we've already explained that they have, Superman has this much strength, these robots are stronger, Superman can fly, we have jetpacks for them. Like, he's already kind of explained how the suit would work.
Yeah, and I
before it
agree
became
that they
mech.
can fly and all that stuff, but I like the idea of just the visual of it becoming Lex versus the Kryptonians and Superman versus the Kryptonians, and like just the vision. Imagine being there. You see Zod and his terraforming machines and this island that he's created, and it's already started to be built up to look more kryptonite. And out of the ocean, as the tides are coming in, you have just lines upon lines of mechs marching out of the sea.
It's. I mean,
Plus, you'd have to sneak up on them.
I mean, the only thing the reason that I don't like that is it doesn't make sense from a tactical point. All right, they're gonna spot those ships coming in.
Okay, well,
then they're gonna spot them coming out
of the water because
they're gonna have to walk a lot farther under the water. It would make more sense to airdrop them in the way that you would do a paratroopers, and then jetpack come in, boom, from the sky. It makes more sense. It doesn't. You don't like it because it's not a scene, but I
just think it looks cooler.
It looks cooler, but it does not. It's gonna be one of those things people are going to look at and be like, "But why?"
Okay, but I'm okay with small plot holes when it works.
The whole point of this podcast is to rewrite movies so they make sense, they work better, and they're not full of freaking plot holes like that. And that is why would they just have them come out the water? Is a dumb plot hole.
But why would they? I mean, he's gonna see them coming from bombers too.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're not worried about them seeing them coming from bombers if they're up in the sky, up above the cloud levels, right? And we could have it where like the terraformers creating huge clouds, anyhow, right? So they're flying in the cloud level. Suddenly, drop all these mechs coming out the back end of bombers, and then as Lex has got Superman under a spear with kryptonite at him. All of a sudden, you look up, and here comes these mechs just falling from the sky, like hundreds of them falling in, and then they, up in like a ball shape, then they unravel, jets, and then they just start shooting up on the island, or floating up above around the island, and just create like this huge wall of mechs around the island. And then through the speakers is the general going, we've uncovered what you're doing. You're planning on terraforming the whole Earth, and we're not going to allow that. You have broken the agreements that we have set forth, and we want you to stop those machines and go peacefully. And that's when Zod and his people start fighting back, and then the fight begins. And that allows Superman to at least break away from the kryptonite. And he starts fighting Zod personally while Zod's forces are fighting the
okay.
thing.
Well, if you're listening, people, I get what he's saying. I'm gonna leave that up to the audience. Tell me if my idea was better because it looks more cinematically pleasing, and I don't see it as a big issue. Or would you want to see the dome of mechas flying around and creating this big old bubble event around it? So, but anyways, let's continue.
But yeah, so Lex's machines are fighting the Kryptonian forces, which there's not very many of them, but they are still showing off. They've been under the yellow sun a little bit, that they're now catching some powers, like the super jump that Superman, instead of flying, they're able to jump, and they have strength and stuff like that. Right, so the machines are kind of getting wrecked a little bit, but they are, toe-to-toe with these things. Superman and Zod are fighting and whatnot, and Zod, during the fight, he hits Superman with the Kryptonian spear and basically stuns him, and that's when Zod turns the terraformer up to full blast, which would normally make it very unstable, but he's going to try to hurry up and do this, right? So as he's doing that, the crystals are forming faster, breaking. The bots are flying around, and suddenly crystals come up and slap them and break them apart and stuff like that, and it's causing chaos everywhere, right? But Superman and gets the spear out, starts fighting Zod, and as it goes on, Zod is starting to catch more and more of his powers, right? So, he eventually, we could have, a similar scene where, he got the X-ray vision type thing. Superman thinks that he's going to get behind this wall, and then Zod sees them through it and just like busts right through the wall with a high jump kind of thing. Well, we could also show the battle outside where the mechs are trying to hit the terraformer and attack it and causing damage. And eventually, I would have it where Zod and Superman make it onto the terraformer itself, and as they're fighting and whatnot, and eventually something happens. It starts to blow up, and Zod's like, "No, I can't have this thing go." And then, but Superman's like, "No, if you don't go in there, it'll kill you. It's gonna kill. We got to turn this machine. I got to turn the machine off." And Zod's, fighting him and says, "No, no, it's got to happen. We have to make a new Krypton." And eventually, Superman, it gets to a point where Superman has to make the choice of either get out of there or he's gonna die, or let Zod, blow himself up basically. And so he has to get out there. The machine explodes due to the damage and the fact that it's on full power. Superman gets away, but in the explosion he does get hit and like flung way the hell out there. And then the aftermaths of it is basically Lex Luthor and his mechs are declared the winning, like, they're the ones that won the fight, right? Lex is the hero of this whole deal. And I could even have it where, like, maybe the scientists that figured out that the whole thing was happening was Lex Luthor's people. Like, this was something Lex was monitoring, and he's the one that told the U.S. General. Like, eventually, the world sees Lex as the right one, and Lex, through his his thing, is kind of puts Superman in a bad light. Lois tries to write stories that it wasn't Superman. He didn't realize what was going on. He tried to stop it once she informed him and whatnot, but it doesn't really get the attraction.
Also, since you said it kind of blasts him off, I would have it left up where they're not even sure if Superman survived it or not.
Yeah.
Right? I would almost, end the movie with that sort of mindset. Now the world has changed. We know that there's others among us, but Zod and his people are now gone. They basically have created a crater, in the Pacific of the aftermath of it. Superman has not been seen since it. We don't know if he's dead, on the run, if he died with his people, what. And Lex has come out on top. And then, have it where, at the end of the movie, Lois Lane is trying to find him, right?
Yeah.
She's trying to find him.
I would have it like this, where Lois is basically on the run, kind of like a Julian... What's the guy that did WikiLeaks? Julian Nazar, or whatever his name is?
Yeah, something like that.
Where basically the U.S. government wants her because they think she knows who Superman is for real, and wants to use her to track him down because they think maybe he's still alive, whatnot. She's on the run trying to get the story out that Superman's not the bad guy here, that he actually was trying to save them, and she's, kind of trying to stay away from being captured by the U.S., from interrogating her and figuring out who Superman really is. And this sets up where we get into, like, once we get into, like, the Batman v Superman type storyline, why a Batman would have such disdain for a Superman. Why the world wouldn't be exactly 100% on his side. Set up a reason why somebody like Amanda Waller would put up make a Suicide Squad. It creates the purpose of such groups later on.
Yeah, because you create a sort of distrust of superpowered people and people of it. So you create this sort of, almost in a slight way, similar to the X-Men mentality in a lot of ways, where you set up this sort of where people are uneasy about the idea, now that they've had their own reality and concept of, whether we're alone or not, shattered. And not only are we not alone, there are people from other planets, who may be among us now, because we had one living with us for 30-some years, right? Who's to say there aren't others living among us who are, powerful beings that are hiding? What happens when they pop up? What's the next disaster, right?
And the technology, how is it going to be used and abused?
Yeah, and now you have that technology because, Lex have it where Lex, is because of being the victor, right? And he's being this military guy. He's got to be the one. Him and his team gets the one to do the salvaging of the island. We
Yeah.
learn about later, and so he gets to now take that technology and actually go further into bettering his mech technology and to his other projects, and set it up where Lex has now been set up as sort of the gold standard of technology now in the world.
Yeah.
Right? You create him that way. Leave it where Superman has disappeared. Lois Lane is on the run, and really set it up in a different tone that sets it up where there needs to be a follow. Man of Steel, for the most part, as a movie, one was never planned to be a mecha, multi-franchise system. It really didn't set itself up as a solo franchise very well, because
No.
at the end of it, it kind of closed on its own and
Yeah.
didn't help itself. So by doing this, you leave a lot of cliffhangers there, like where's Superman? Where's Lois? Because Lois is on the run now. What happens now, right? What
Yeah.
is the world going to be after? What is the after effects? Because the explosion of the terraformer, not only does it leave a crater in, right, the Pacific, I would have it where it does physical damage to that section of the world, where it's like the ocean just not there anymore, right? Just something so dramatic.
Basically, just a giant wall of ice and a circle of crystal has just appeared as around where the terraformer is, and now it's like a bowl with the ocean on the outside of
Yeah,
it.
it's something like that, where it's created such a damage, and that sort of, not only would the explosion have caused, typhoons and stuff like that, it also has created typhoons in people's perceptions, in their mindsets, in people's responses to things, giving us the reason for Amanda Waller and Argus and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
Later on, and it let that explosion and that event be sort of like throwing a pebble into water. It's that ripple effect. Everything goes off of that moment, right? That explosion changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good way to stop the movie, is basically on this. It's a low point, kind of thing, but then I would probably, my final scene of the movie would probably be something where, like, Lois is, typing her story or whatnot, and you see that she's, like, maybe in, like, Paris or something. Like, you can see the Eiffel Tower in the background, and she's just typing on her laptop on some balcony, talking about, now the world thinks that Kal-El, that Superman, is a bad guy, but I know the truth, and I will stay, or I'm on the run because of that truth. But I will never let myself be silenced. I'll never let, his truth be silenced. And then have it where, like, she's sitting there typing, and then you see, like, the shadow of somebody coming down, floating down, and she looks up, looks happy. Kill it.
Well, I would have it whoever floats down, whenever they do float down, have it where you see her smile as she's looking up, and then the last scene is that person coming down, and we see the red cape.
Yeah.
And then that's end.
Mm-hmm.
That way we know Superman lives. He's now with Lois. They're both on the run.
Yeah.
Right? And we've set that kind of thing up. I think that's better. There's still a lot of things I'm not really comfortable with this movie. I think it's a very good start. I think it works in a lot of ways. But I think as a good jumping off point, it does work. It sets things up. The only question I would have from here going forward in sort of where we would go, would you do a second Man of Steel movie before you do a Batman vs. Superman, or would you do a solo Batman movie?
I would probably do a solo Batman movie to establish him and help establish, because, like, one of the ideals that I think was great from Marvel was the after effects of the Battle of New York, where, like, the alien technology got into the black market and people were abusing it, right? Like, the Vulture makes his wings out of it. There's a short where, like, a couple has one of the guns and they tried to rob a bank with it. Like, I would set up something like that, where that kind of the reason that we get a Batman later in his years, but he's dealing with the after effects of that, which includes, some of Gotham's biggest criminals getting their hands on alien technology, alien weaponry, and whatnot. And I would go into, and that's a whole nother podcast, obviously, but I would start establishing a world where the after effects isn't just in a big scale; it's also in the small scale, and people are trying to deal with the fallout of that.
Yeah, and that
Because
also gives you a reason for Aquaman to get involved because that kind of explosion in the oceans and stuff kind of disturbs Aquaman and his world,
yep,
right? You do all these things, and it sort of is almost, and I don't want to sound cliche, but it's almost like an awakening,
yeah,
right? Within the world. It's like everyone from Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, all these characters that will come after, it's like that moment is an awakening of this new rising of heroes and things.
yeah.
So, but that's where I think would be the best starting place. I always thought that Man of Steel had a great amount of potential. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that it came out during a time period where, like I said, it was that Transformers, Michael Bay mentality. We really hadn't, up to Man of Steel, shown how to, other than Marvel, DC hadn't figured out how to do a successful superhero movie.
Well, I don't think DC was trying to put together a franchise like the Marvel Universe originally, because I think they were building. They just did the Superman movie as a one-off, not thinking about a connected universe.
Yeah,
And then
because
once
Batman and
they,
Superman didn't come out to what, 2017, almost 3 years after?
yeah, um, I'm about to see. I think Iron Man 1 was before all this.
Yeah, Iron Man was 2008.
Yeah, but
Because back in 2008, roughly, was when we had the Brandon Roth Superman, because that was supposed to be a launch off movie.
yeah,
People forget, but that was supposed to be taking as sort of a continuation of the Christopher Reeves Superman, which is why it had that old look. And we were supposed to expand that into a universe, because there was at one time we were going to get a Green Lantern movie, which is technically what we ended up getting later on, but not very well.
yeah,
That was some of the leftover effects of that.
yeah.
So DC had been trying for a long time, but when they did the Man of Steel at the time, they were just trying to do a Superman franchise, because that had been the only thing really DC had done cinematically that had worked previously. And while the Brandon Roth one didn't work,
Well, they had. I think they had the one Batman movie, the Dark Knight Rises. I think that's that. Yeah, that was that had worked, and I think that's why they went with gritty Superman.
yes, but the reason Batman worked is because Batman lent itself to that. That is Batman.
Yeah,
Batman is always meant to be the grittier, dark version of justice, right? Gotham and Metropolis are basically like dark and light.
yeah.
That was
Actually, because I just looked it up. The Dark Knight was 2008. Dark Knight Rises was 2012. So both of those movies had gone before Man of Steel, and they probably tried to copy the success of those into the Man of Steel to make this gritty, but they weren't planning on a connected universe,
well,
and
if
that's
they
what
wanted to,
shows.
they would have connected it to the Christopher Nolan Batman, and we could have gotten, an extenuation of that, but we didn't.
No, but yeah, hopefully with what we've set up, we'll be able to like push on and do DCU RR. I guess is
Yeah, because some of them are going to be
rewritten.
full reboot episodes. Some are going to have to be rewrites, because we're sort of rebooting it in certain parts and rewriting certain other things. So it's a very broad stroke approach to everything.
Yeah, and like we said, we're not going like the next episode's not going to be another DCU movie, but eventually down the line we'll get into each one of them over a period of time, break them down. We might even we probably will have to do a special episode of our own version of the Batman movie that would set up the Batman v Superman kind of world, I think.
Yeah, that might work as sort of a bonus episode. Um, we've kind of talked a little bit about where we're going with this, and one of the bigger things that we're looking into doing, and really, it comes down to with you as the audience wants. But we've been talking about setting up a Patreon. We don't know how that would work, or what people are looking at, but we've been talking about maybe doing some sort of bonus episodes, like movies that we looked at that we can't work with for various amounts of reasons, or like he said, like adding movies to a franchise to make it work better instead of, since it's not a review of a movie. Like
Yeah.
things like that, whatever y'all would like to see. That's kind of some of the ideas we have. And we'd really like to hear your thoughts on it, and whether or not you think, you'd want to support us and a Patreon. That would really help us out, because this stuff isn't cheap. Paying editors and doing stuff like that.
Plus, we'd like to eventually get a thing so we can get a third mic and start having guests on here.
Yeah, definitely. I've told you before that I felt like, as much as I like talking to you, and we do this daily all the time.
Yes.
On all sorts of movies and subjects, that I feel like having other people in here can change the energy in the room. There's a lot of good friends of mine that I would love to bring on, so we've talked about eventually getting a mixing board that's going to allow for multiple mic setups. Right now we have like a Focusrite Scarlett that is allowing us to do two mics at the same time. But we would definitely like to be able to add at least another person, guest spots, do things like that in the future. So that's going to, if that's something you want to do and want to support us, let us know, and we'll try to get something together.
All right. Well, I think that is a good closing for this episode, because I feel like we could ramble on, and if allowed to, we'd probably rewrite this whole movie all over again if we keep on. So let's end this here for tonight. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Rewrites and Reboots, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, be sure, before I let you go, be sure to follow us on our Facebook page at Rewrites and Reboots. We're also on Twitter at RRPodcast1. Yeah, be sure to follow us, and thank you so much for listening. Till next time.